I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Council of the Village of Chase, held here in the council chambers at the Village of Office, 826 Okanagan Avenue, and via Zoom, June 17th, 2025 at 4 p.m. to order. The motion to adopt the agenda, Councillor Coniff, Councillor Herman, all in favor? That's carried. Adoption of the minutes, there's none. Number 4, public hearings, there's none. Public input on current agenda items, there's nobody here. Is there anybody on Zoom?
There's one guy
One
that
person.
led on
Two.
Zoom. Two on.
Is there anybody on Zoom that has any questions on items on this agenda? Okay, I'm hearing none. We'll move to 6 delegations, there's none. 7 reports, none. 8 unfinished business, none. 9 new business. 9.1 fees and charges amendment bylaw 955/2025 solid waste fees. There's a memo from the CFO. She's on holidays, I've been told, so the CAO. Do you have anything to add to this, CAO?
I can just add, Mr. Mayor, that back in April, council received a report from the CFO, which included a bunch of things to do with taxes and utility paying costs, utility fees, and included a recommendation to increase the solid waste fees by 10%. So what she's done in the bylaw is changed how the fees will work so that there won't be an annual container lease. We're combining it with the annual basic fee, which makes things a little easier for everybody. And because we might have to purchase a new vehicle, and we'll get to that the next few items. And of course, the service needs to pay for itself, so.
So it's basically $4.65.
Yeah.
So there's a recommendation there. Does Councilor Herman?
I move that council give first, second, and third readings to fees and charges amendment bylaw number 955/2025.
Second by Councillor Stevens, discussion.
How much did you
Councillor
say?
Coniff?
How much did you say it was, Fred?
$4.65 a quarter.
A quarter. That's pretty good.
Minimum. Cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's about it, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
There's no thinking about that one.
No. So any other discussion? No. Okay, all in favor? That's carried. 9.2, trees on village properties, service level discussion. CAO, I'll pass this over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is actually going to be led today by the Manager of Public Works. And he'll explain why it's on here and what we're looking from council. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you very much. So today I wanted to have a kind of brief discussion on boulevard trees within the community. So we often get requests from residents to come and trim their trees or assess the trees if they're on village property or if they're overhanging onto said property. Is that ready to? So purpose of today was to just kind of start some discussion on it. Past practice, as I had mentioned, has been to have the health of the trees assessed. So we bring an arborist in, and that will help us determine the fate of the tree. More often than not, though, this doesn't actually meet the needs of our residents. They're actually looking to have the tree removed, for instance, that sort of thing. Some communities have a kind of tree canopy bylaw, some communities have a good neighbor or a property boulevard maintenance bylaw that some of these things can be addressed in. But we currently, with the Village of Chase, do not have anything in our bylaws or policy.
Can you share this with us after the meeting? Are you able to share this presentation with us?
Yeah, it's only 2 slides.
Okay, yeah, then we just don't have to take notes.
Sure.
Okay.
Mike, that tree on Arbutus was actually the one I talked to you about before, was overgrowing the road.
Correct.
And it was so low that it was, anybody that's towing an RV could get hung up on that tree.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so now my experience with those types of trees is, we have some in the strata.
Mhm.
We got a tree guy come in and trim those off, because that tree should not be over the road at all. It should be rounded off and cut down. Like they're just growing wild, they're not being maintained. And that's what causes the problem, is they're not being maintained.
So let's finish the presentation and then we'll go to questions.
Sure.
That wasn't a question, that was a comment.
Okay, we'll go to questions.
I think that's exactly what we're here to talk about. What village council wants to maintain. You can by bylaw put that back on the residents. But if we're to take that on, going forward, we're gonna need budgets and that sort of stuff to be dealing with those. Every tree we remove costs somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 to do the health assessments on those trees. Probably kind of couple $100 to do a health assessment on the tree, but if that's not meeting the needs of our residents, why are we spending that money doing those assessments when we could put that, it's a minor amount of money, but we could put that towards actually doing the work if that's what our residents want. So what can we do? Maintaining the vegetation on the village right of way is costly. We can pick any street basically within the community and drive down it, and you're gonna see trees and hedges that are on village property that currently we would maintain. So different options that we can do, we can maintain the status quo with the village doing danger assessments on trees as requested. Obviously this has a cost and doesn't meet the needs of our residents. Other options could be including it in a maintenance or a good neighbor boulevard bylaw so that we deal with specific types of trees, where we might have it based on size or that sort of thing. I think the last thing that we would want, as Councillor Torgrim kind of pointed out a minute ago, we don't want anybody out there with an orchard ladder in the middle of the road trying to do their own pruning and that sort of stuff either. But saying all of that, there's a fairly big cost burden to the municipality to maintain all of these trees. So I currently have a few different requests that are in. One of them in particular is on birch. I think there's 4 or 5 trees that need to come out there. And between that and the arbutus trees that we removed out, that'll be pretty close to using up my budget for 2025 for tree removals within the community.
Just some on cedar, that they wanna get rid of them too.
On birch, on
Cedar,
those were the ones I think that we pruned last
they
year.
pruned off the roof, yeah.
Yeah. So there are dozens of scenarios around the community that I can spend my annual budget on kind of every year. But would like kind of some ideas from council as to how you want this dealt with going forward.
I would be in huge favor of building a good neighbor bylaw here. I think it's well past due. It can encompass so many different aspects and even existing bylaws that we have. It also gives us an opportunity to put some wildfire DPAs in, which is interesting. When it comes, I don't think that the cost should go back on the village, but I'd kind of like to put that back on the resident and be a taxpayer myself and feel good saying that. And then when it comes to the tree type, I'm really interested. So I'm assuming these trees aren't dead, dying, or diseased. They're just nuisance trees. Because if they were DDDs, we would be removing them probably for safety, right?
They could run the whole gamut of health-wise, but the problem ones that we're trying to kind of manage here would be more the healthy trees that somebody just wants removed for aesthetic reasons either for view or because of droppings from the leaves or.
Totally, and that's understandable, and
Yeah.
when I think more about trees, I think like we need the shade, and we're living in a time when the climate is really hot and the trees provide a ton of shade relief and cooling. I would be really hesitant to move forward with removing deciduous or broadleaf trees, especially like coniferous trees like the spruce, pines, the firs. I don't really mind getting rid of those, although they do play a part in our ecosystem. In these cases, they're really close to houses, they're fire hazards, unlike the deciduous trees. But, one thing maybe we can talk about and consider is if we do pull deciduous trees, maybe we can create some sort of policy or something as a council where for every one deciduous tree that's removed, maybe we look at and identify an area in the community where we plant 3 additional deciduous trees. And we work towards a program, something like that. I think there's existing programs like the Million Trees thing. A lot of it has to do with deciduous trees or with coniferous trees, but I've heard some communities have success with deciduous growth as well. And yeah, maybe it's time that we started doing some deciduous planting all the way down Shuswap Avenue or something like that to make that entrance and that roadway look really beautiful, because it really can, especially when they're in full bloom. Probably add a little bit of maintenance to the public works, crew with leaf and trim and additional maintenance that comes with trees. But yeah, I think that's pretty much my thought on it. I think that 1,000 to 2,000 for tree removal, it adds up really quick. Yeah, if I don't, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it open for discussion. But those are just my thoughts.
I just wanted to get back to the start. So what do we currently do, Mike? Do you have a budget?
Yeah, so we actually increased the budget this year to $20,000 for this tree removal. In the past, it was actually either $10,000 or $15,000. And again, that just doesn't get us very far. I think our Budas came in around $6,500 when we did the trimmings there. And so now we've got a few others. So maybe building off of what Councillor Stevens was kind of mentioning, maybe a motion from council, if council was interested in a good neighbor bylaw or that sort of thing, maybe a motion from council for staff to investigate and bring back some options on something like that would be appropriate.
Councillor Herman?
Yeah, I'm totally in favor of a good neighbor bylaw, I think, but I don't really know what that entails. I'd like to see the different kinds of good neighbor bylaws and how they work in different cities or towns. I'd really like to see that.
Councillor Stevens and then Councillor Connett.
Vernon has a really good neighbor bylaw, and it encompasses everything from keeping peace in your home to the sightfulness of your yard and everything in between. So it is a good one, for example, and I think you can just probably find it right on the website, but I'm definitely in favor of what you just said there and just maybe exploring a little bit more. And I like your idea of potentially council bringing forward the idea of what that might look like for staff to draw up.
Councillor Connett?
If there's a tree in front of my yard and it's on public property, and if I wanna get rid of it, I wanna get rid of it. And hopefully the village will come and cut it down, and whether it's got leaves or pine needles or not. If there's a fire, it doesn't matter if you got a leafy tree or not, I mean, it's gonna go up in friggin' smoke and that. And yeah, putting more shit on the taxpayer for, you didn't mow this or you didn't prune that, I mean, that's enough. We don't need any more of that. Let's just get rid of the trees, and if somebody says, oh, could you come and get rid of this tree, let's get rid of it now.
Councillor,
Don't try to prune
wanna
it.
go first?
Yeah.
Councillor Stevens?
I don't think the village should be on the hook for getting rid of trees that are on public property that we don't want to get rid of is all. I think if a resident wants to get rid of a tree on their property, then they're more than welcome to with their own pocketbook. But we also own some of the land too, don't we? Own the first couple of feet of everyone's yard, basically on most streets.
20 feet.
20 feet, yeah.
It's close to 20 square feet.
What,
Interesting.
so when this originally started, like when I was first on council, we didn't have any policy. And this was brought in just for liability for the village, was my understanding. We were just, so if someone tries to sue to get hurt, sort of the golf course has the same type of deal, they cut so many trees and it's, but now this is something more than a liability, is that what's happening here? If I can, through the CAO? Like, why are you bringing this to us now?
Through the CAO, yes, I would say that it's more than a liability, it's a service request that people are having. They're looking to have, as Councillor Conant mentioned, they're phoning us and looking to have a tree removed that's on the public right of way.
Councillor Torban?
I just, cause the one, there on Arbutus Place down there, that big fir tree that's leaning over the power lines is on village property. That's a danger tree, because if that comes down, it's gonna rip a lot of stuff out of there. And like, danger trees like that should be removed, like regardless. You're not gonna save it, or you can't fix it. The only way you fix it is remove it.
Yes, yeah, but that's what we need budget and stuff like
Yeah.
that for.
Do you find there's enough in the budget to deal with the danger trees?
I try and push off the requests, kind of with the health of the tree until later in the season, so that I can deal with my danger trees to begin with. Saying that, I kind of have to get the tree assessment done to determine whether or not they're a danger tree. And with the process that we've been using right now, it was seeming like I wasn't sure if we were kind of wasting our money on those assessments, if we're just gonna be removing them anyways. Just very quickly, back to Councillor Conant's question or comments about putting things back kind of on the homeowners and the taxpayer, and I think that that's what this discussion's kind of all about as well. Regardless of which way we deal with it, it goes back to the homeowner. It's just finding the most fair and equitable way to deal with it. If you have a tree that's in front of your property on your boulevard, does everybody on the street pay $50 or a couple $100 sort of thing to remove it, or do you pay the $2,000 that it would cost to remove the tree on your property? So I think that's the situation that we're in. It isn't a good scenario by any stretch. I mean, I'm not looking to recommend that we put any more burden on our taxpayers either, but finding that happy medium there.
Right.
Councillor Conant?
There isn't that many trees anyways, really. But if somebody wants to get rid of the tree and it's unsightly, the leaves are going everywhere and stuff like that. They didn't plant it. If they planted it there, yeah, but if they maybe bought the house and they inherited it or whatever, and that's not their problem, it's the village's problem, and they would like to get rid of it, either that or go out with a power saw and ring it till it's dead, and then you got a problem, you know. That's what I told the people on Arbutus to do, kill the tree, and then the village would have to take them down.
But like, I don't
Councillor
think,
Torban?
I don't think we need like some of those trees we're looking at though, that it's pretty obvious, like that fir tree that I was talking about. I mean, it's pretty obvious, you don't need an assessment on it, we know why we have to cut it down. We don't need somebody to come and say, yeah, you should remove that tree, and pay them to say that. I think the obvious ones, just deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's the less obvious ones.
Yeah, the ones that are like rotten in the middle and you can't really tell, then yeah, those ones, they can be tested.
So I'm gonna ask a CAO question, something came up. I don't think the village owns stuff 20 feet inside my property.
No.
That was something, but to the boulevard, like I'm responsible for maintaining my own boulevard. Now, when staff does some research, this might fall under that, maybe?
So I have done some research on it already. I did take a look at our boulevard, it's not a boulevard maintenance maintenance bylaw.
Property maintenance.
Property maintenance bylaw. And it doesn't specifically address trees, it talks about sightlines and vegetation, but specifically omits, trees.
So is this a possibility of adding something to the boulevard maintenance bylaw? Is that where we might be heading? Is that I don't know who I'm asking, one of the three here.
Mr. Mayor, I think that's a possibility depending on what options council considers if we get a bunch of information and bring it back. So we can bring back examples like what Councillor Stevens is suggesting in the Vernon bylaw, and there's others like it. There is legislation, I think it's the highways legislation that requires the boulevards to be maintained by the adjacent property owner. And then we regulate like what that's sort of supposed to look like. But we could put something more into a bylaw. I guess the whole idea here is that we've been getting requests, not so much requests for trees like what Councillor Torbaum is providing here, not an example like that, but we get requests from people who say, I don't want that tree there because it's messy and I gotta rake up stuff and all this kind of stuff, so they want it removed. But we can't, if it's a perfectly healthy tree, or we think it's a perfectly healthy tree and it's not impinging on wires and all that kind of stuff, that's when Mike says, well, we better get an assessment, and then we have to go back to the property owner and say, there's nothing wrong with this tree. Well, I don't want it there. So that's why we're trying to get some sort of guidance here, and if we can bring back some ideas for council to sort of consider, whether we pay, and if we pay, then we have to increase the budget, or whether we say they all come out, or we say some have to be planted somewhere, whatever that looks like.
Does someone make a motion and then we can go into Councillor Stevens?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. So I move that council direct staff to bring council a report outlining information for council on what a good neighbor bylaw looks like for the village of Chase.
Do I have a seconder?
Awesome.
So, just for discussion, is there some way we can allow staff more leeway there, like to
Yeah, I just wanna add in
report
here,
back? Councillor Torbaum?
like the trees that are on village property, if there's nothing wrong with them, it should be fine. Like, just because somebody says, oh, wakes up one morning and says, well, I would like that tree removed. Well, it's not on your property, you don't get the choice of removing it or not. It's village property, we get the choice of whether we're gonna remove it or not.
Since Councillor Stevens made the motion, do you wanna?
Yeah, one of the other options that we have too is, so it's a little more roundabout and it's no money to the taxpayer, is if we partner with our local fire smart coordinator in his next grant. So that next grant can be written for up to 2 years. We can look at things like rebates for trees. Rebates exist right now in local communities for up to $5,000 per home. So, you know, we can absolutely explore that. And then there's zero burden to the taxpayers. Mind you, with that, they will never approve getting rid of deciduous trees because deciduous trees do not burn the same way coniferous trees burn.
Councillor Connaught and Councillor Berman?
But go ahead, Jane.
I was just gonna say, I really agree with the, not getting rid of trees on village property that are in good shape. Just because somebody decides they don't like them, the next homeowner in that place might want trees. Like, I don't think, if you buy a place that's got some trees and they're healthy, you might have to break the leaves. It's just the way it is. For me,
Okay, Councillor Connaught?
I don't.
Mike, do you have any idea how many trees are on, like there's some on birch, there's, like I said, there's 3 over here at cedar. I mean, there isn't a hell of a lot. Now, what if a limb fell on a guy's car and it was a village tree? What happened then? So it lands on a kid.
Well, that's why you do tree management.
Oh, yeah, but
Okay.
you're not, get rid of them. Just get rid of the frickin' things. If you wanna plant a tree in your yard, go and plant one.
So staff's looking for some type of guidance here, and I think Councillor Stevens has just about got it, but is there enough in that motion to get what staff's? the staff's looking for something, because people are coming to them wanting the tree down, and their reply is, and they're looking for some guidance from us, so. Councillor,
Mr. Mayor, if we could, just like you suggested, maybe broaden that a little bit, so we can bring back council some good neighbor bylaw examples. Also, some other information, like costs, if we were to take on the whole thing, how much it's gonna cost us as the taxpayers generally, or have some criteria, or get some more information from Fire Smart to see what kind of options there might be out of that funding. And we can bring all that stuff back, and then we can have a really good discussion, and we'll have some recommendations as well.
I just wanna point out
Councillor Torban,
that, in the house I lived in on Blue Spruce, my neighbor had a huge maple tree there. Technically, it's in his yard, it's his responsibility, but guess who had to clean it up? I did, because it grew over into my yard. I cleaned it up, I had to trim the tree, I had to do all that work, my neighbor wasn't gonna pay for it to do that. And this is sort of a similar situation where we own the tree, but where there's trees, and there's trees in the forest everywhere, there's gonna be leaves and stuff fall down and you have to rake them up. That's the normal course of life. So if somebody's whining about a friggin' tree in front of their house, then guess what? You bought that property, that tree was there, that's part of your job, to maintain your property and rake up the friggin' leaves. That's just the way it is. You don't have an option when your neighbor has a tree, you're gonna rake it up, because they're not gonna come over and rake it up for you.
Sort of
And
a
it should be the
fence.
same, we shouldn't be treating people's yards in town any different than we're treating our own property for the village. It should all be treated the same, I think.
so Councillor Stevens?
Yeah, so I just wanted to go back to the good neighbor bylaw. It gives us an opportunity to really define for the Village of Chase what it means to be a good neighbor too. So it is not a slouch of a bylaw. Like it's a pretty big process. It's gonna cost a bit of money for it to be drafted up, and it's also gonna give us an opportunity to revamp some of our older bylaws, take a look at them, and like Councillor Torban mentions, we can even, I think we could put in something in the good neighbor bylaw, like if you have a tree that's overgrowing into your neighbor's house, like, and your neighbor requests that you prune it, like you have to prune it, like, you know, I really think that these are things we could explore potentially, in a good neighbor bylaw, but yeah, it goes well, like a good neighbor bylaw goes well beyond just trees, but I think this is a really good start.
So, Councillor
You're
Coniff,
bringing in more bylaws and that, I mean, and if somebody's tree's hanging over their fence and that, and you're gonna give them shit and that, well, bullshit. Well, it's starting to become a bloody dictatorship then. Start saying, you know, you have to do this and you have to do that.
I kind
Get
of,
rid of the stinking trees.
I think, and that's Councillor Stevens, but I wouldn't mind, like you made a motion that staff is asking to maybe modify it
Yes.
somewhat, I'm just asking, how do we go about
Well,
doing
if
that?
Councillor Stevens is okay with expanding the direction to staff, just to bring back other information and other options and stuff,
So
and
the, so the motion would be
it
what?
would be
Since we're
basically,
voting on it,
the staff would bring back information on various information on good neighbor bylaws and trees on public property, options for maintenance, or, you know, we can bring some costs and that kind of stuff. Does that sound, that doesn't sound really well written, but we can make it sound.
is that good enough for everybody?
That's good
Since
enough
we
for
spent
me.
half an hour.
Yeah, and I just Councillor Coniff, it's, a lot of the existing bylaws can actually then be encompassed under the good neighbor, so we might be adding a few more things to a single bylaw, but we would be compiling a lot of different bylaws.
And you
into
said it's a
one.
cost, there's a cost too, so more on the
Absolutely.
taxpayer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, bullshit. Taxpayers get enough, $4 every 3
Okay,
months.
so we're gonna put it to the vote, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Coniff, and you want that recorded?
You better want it recorded.
As we were just talking about it, I'm looking out the window there and I'm seeing the house that has their trees growing over onto village property, and all the mess is coming on village property.
Okay, thanks.
So it works both ways.
Okay, thanks for that, you guys, fellow councilors. We'll now move on. Is there anything else, Public Works, once on that one? I think we're good. Okay. We'll move on to 9.3, solid waste collection, business case for service delivery. We have a verbal report from the manager of Public Works, and this was brought up at a previous council meeting, so through to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I'll have our manager of Public Works take it away. He's got a prepared presentation to just clarify the report that was prepared for us by the consultant.
Excuse me.
So thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. Just quickly wanted to go over the curbside collection business case that we received a couple of weeks ago from Sterling Hansen. So the purposes of this review was for the Village of Chase to conduct a cost-benefit analysis to evaluate two different options for for waste collection services. Number one, purchasing a new truck through a competitive tendering process, and the second one was outsourcing the service to a private contractor. The assessment is necessary due to the age and condition of the current collection truck, which has increasingly led to operational challenges and service disruptions, as council's aware of. By comparing the long-term financial implications, the operational efficiency, and the service reliability of both approaches, the village aims to determine the most cost-effective and sustainable solution for maintaining consistent waste collection services for our residents. So currently, the way that we provide our solid waste service collection is the service operates 4 days a week, so it runs from Tuesday to Friday. The current truck, we have a 2016 International 29-foot double axle truck, which is split body for both recycling and garbage, and it's got the Labrie refuse box on it. The garage bay that it's stored in was specifically built to house that 29-foot vehicle. I think I've got about 10 inches or so of spare room in there. Generally, we do one single trip per day to the South Thompson Eco Depot in Pritchard. And then the garbage goes to the Mission Flats refuse facility that's operated by the city of Kamloops, and the recyclables get hauled to the sorter in Salmon Arm, which has a contract with Recycle BC. We currently have a single staff member for the pickup. We do have 2 other operators that are qualified to operate the vehicle. So taking a look at in-house collection and contract collection, so we do have an estimated cost for a new truck, which is $664,000. If we purchase that in-house, we would be financing that through a MFA loan that's done over 5 years. 5 years is the limit before we have to go to referendum from the residents to borrow and that sort of stuff. And with the service life of a garbage truck being 7 years, payback in 5 years probably makes a fair amount of sense anyways. With the contract collection, some of the things that are of note here is the cost of the truck is the same. And I think when we actually get to kind of the finance section and stuff like that, pretty much everything is comparable across the board, whether it's we're doing it in-house or we contract it out. We're both gonna have to purchase a new $664,000 vehicle. We're both gonna have to maintain those vehicles, that sort of thing. So there are some additional costs, administrative costs to contracting out. Obviously, the putting out the actual tender itself, as well as fielding phone calls, complaints from our residents that we pass along to the contractor to actually deal with. But we lose that care and control then. The consultant used a 15% profit markup, as we know, for any private enterprise to be successful and to continue on their service and all that sort of stuff, they have to be profitable. So there's a profit markup, obviously, if we go with a contracted service. Chase has a small contract, and where that kind of comes into play is when we start taking a look at the different service providers that we have in the area. That is very limited, and so that's kind of a big red flag for us. Contract length of 7 years was recommended by the consultant. That had to do with the acquisition of the vehicle and the service life of that vehicle. So 7 years basically guaranteed them cost certainty for the depreciation of that piece of equipment. As a part of the review, the consultant also reached out to local municipalities within the region, Salmon Arm, Kamloops, as well as some smaller little communities like the River Shore community just outside of Kamloops. Generally speaking, the local municipalities were not interested in a more regional kind of service. The city of Kamloops provides theirs in-house, and they've had a lot of issues with their trucks. I believe they've gotten 8 of the newer electric garbage trucks, and if they have 1 or 2 on the road at a time, they're doing pretty good. So they weren't overly interested in a joint service, as well as Salmon Arm. They use a private contractor, CVS I believe it is, and not interested in kind of combining that into one big contract or that sort of thing. And then finally, limited contractors in the local area. So there is CVS that's currently serving Salmon Arm, but other than that, there's very few private contractors that are serving this area. We've been using a company called Bin Dumped when our vehicle breaks down in an emergency situation, and that's worked quite well for us. But they're a very small contractor in the area. As I had mentioned, some other options were reviewed. So some municipal agreements were looked at through this process. There wasn't interest or it wasn't feasible. Purchasing a used vehicle was looked at in this thing. There's an increased risk to the financial viability and the continuation of service. I think we would only look at something like a midlife truck if we were trying to bridge a 3-year sort of window, or we couldn't have the service sort of thing. Rental truck, that's a good short-term option. That's kind of almost what we're doing currently when we have an emergency situation, when the vehicle breaks down. Generally speaking, that's costing us approximately $1,500 a day when the vehicle goes down. And then finally, they took a look at a short-term contract, and that really just delays the decision-making that we have to do with this one anyways. So next slide, Mike. So this slide here kind of just shows the pros and cons of the two services, both in-house and contracted services. Generally speaking, some of the advantages of in-house, we get care and control of the service. So when a resident phones us and our garbage can was tipped over or not happy about kind of something, we're able to respond to that. Provides a good job. the Village of Chase can build up capital funding for financing the next truck through the fees collected. So again, for a contracted service to be successful, they need to make profit off of that. By doing it in-house, there is no profits, and we're able to save for the next vehicle or that sort of thing. Some of the big disadvantages, and I think we've all kind of went through some of those through the outages that we've had this year. So it requires us to have backup operators trained. We do have 2 people that can do it, but we would need to maintain that. We have to hire that outside contractor if there are any issues. Obviously, there's a fair amount of risk with maintenance that we would be bearing if it's done in-house. If we contract it out, that risk is transferred over to the contractor. And then the lead times for new trucks are around 2 years. So the current issues that we had this spring will remain during the interim. The contracted collection services, the advantages would be that it would allow for a trial period. If the trial isn't productive and acceptable, a new truck can be purchased. So this is kind of that delay piece that we just saw in the last slide. I guess there is some advantages there because we would get some hard and true actual costs, but as I'll explain in a kind of a few minutes, even going through that tendering process, it really is just a snapshot in time of what it costs kind of today or for the life of that contract. Generally speaking, contractors have some spare equipment laying around, so that is a big advantage. There's less administrative effort to manage the collection program by our staff, so all the effort is kind of done up front with the tendering process and that sort of thing. We do field some phone calls as the contract is being done, but less administrative effort. And then any kind of unusual or high cost maintenance is borne by the contractor. Disadvantages, doesn't necessarily put money directly back into the Village of Chase economy, but hopefully does keep it within the region. The enforcement of the contract terms can sometimes be difficult and cause a relationship breakdown with the contractors, such as inability to provide the service, meaning possibly an early termination of the contract if it ever got to that, and possible disruption to the service. And I think we can kind of see that, examples of that with highway maintenance stuff that got turned over about 20 years ago to private contractors and that sort of thing. We just don't get as quick a response, we don't get as high a level of service when we're dealing with a third-party contractor. And then finally, local haulers may not be attracted to a small value contract, and bid prices could show this with high pricing, or alternatively, no bids may be received at all. So the risk assessment. So this is a business case for the service delivery of our solid waste service. Some of the biggest risks that are identified in this report lead to financial risk, but they aren't necessarily quantifiable at this point in time. So risk assessment, so general comments around the risks associated with tariffs and the cost of fuel. We see that in kind of all of these reports. There's never any certainty when we're talking about oil and fuel. The economy of scale. So the cost decreases significantly with increased users. If we could have gotten a little bit more traction with some of our municipal counterparts, there is some economies of scale when you're doing that sort of volume. And there's a fair amount of risk associated with the relatively small contract that we have. The impacts of a certain dollar value increase has a lot greater impact on our small number of residents percentage-wise and that sort of thing. As I had mentioned, contractors need to be profitable. That's what they're in business for, that's what they're doing. If they're not profitable, the service that they're gonna be providing us is not gonna be good. But we then pay for that profitability. Care and control of our service. So that's I think for council and even of staff, that's a really big advantage that we have. And there's I would say some sort of dollar figure even associated with that. If a contractor was coming in even slightly more expensive than an in-house service to have care and control, and I don't know what the exact number is in my own head, but there is a number there that there is value in that care and control. And then the two that I have kind of highlighted here, there's limited options for contracted services in our area. So again, we've got CVS, we've got bin dumped, waste management doesn't have a very big presence here. We're just very, very limited on the companies that are providing a service here. And then we have those limited options for community partnerships to provide the service. In the cost-benefit analysis, so a true cost-benefit analysis would benefit from the RFP process. And that is where, when we get to the recommendation page, that's where the consultant was recommending that we go. That we go to the RFP process, and find out what private contractor would actually charge us. Saying that, it still is only a snapshot in time. With the risk that we have with the limited service providers in this area, in a previous life, I was up in Terrace, and we saw, I believe, a 36% increase when the contract came due. We had one contractor that was bidding on the work, and a 36% increase to that contract was had. And so the RFP process would give us an actual number today and for the term of that contract, but with the limited options that we have for different contractors out there, we can't guarantee what happens to that service going forward. In the analysis that Sperling Hansen provided, the in-house service would likely see an increase of fees from 5% to 27%, and these were based on the previous numbers before the bylaw that councillors gave the first 3 readings to. So I guess it's actually our current number still. So the in-house service would see an increase of up to 27%, whereas the contracted service will likely see an increase of fees, not feed, of 21 to 33%. So it goes from $204 to $223 a year. So the increased costs are directly linked to who is assuming the risk. Right now, we provide the service in-house. As I had mentioned, whether we provide it or a contractor provides it, we both need to purchase the vehicle. We both need to hire a staff member. We both need to administer the service. We both need to, it's essentially equivalent, other than with the risk, they're also putting in a profit margin to ensure that they're profitable in the service provision. So getting to the recommendation, so the consultant had recommended that we issue a request for quotations, so basically go out, gauge interest from the local contractors, find out exactly kind of how many would be willing to bid on it, and actually get a cost for it. If there's sufficient companies interested in providing the services, issue a tender to provide the collection services for a shorter term of 3 to 4 years. And then if there's no companies, then to go and acquire a new truck. So staff recommendation, so a business case, as I kind of just mentioned, is more than just financials. We do take a look at the other risks associated with it, and in this particular case, I think there's some significant other risks. Given the age of our truck, the service provision provided in the past, the lack of municipal partners in the region, and the risk to service fee increases in the future, staff recommend that council direct staff to proceed with issuing a request for tender for the purchase of a new garbage truck. And then there's an in-camera component of this as well. Any questions?
Well, I'm just gonna turn it over to the CAO for a minute. So how would do we have any plans to like finance this? Do we have any money set aside for this truck?
So currently, I believe in the capital budget, we have, I think, $350,000 set aside for this year, is my understanding. And the rest, the CFO was recommending that the rest be funded through an MFA borrowing, like we did with the previous fire truck that we purchased.
Okay, so do we wanna go to a motion and then discussion?
I wanna make
Councilor Corbin?
I'll make the motion that the village purchase a new garbage truck.
Do you have a seconder for that one? Councilor Herman, okay, now we can discussion. Councilor Stevens?
Yes, personally, I don't wanna give the United States of America a cent of our money. Is there no Canadian company building these trucks? Like, or like sufficient garbage trucks? Like, do they all have to come out of the United States? Cause like $664,000 from Chase, British Columbia, Canada. I don't like that very much. But that's just my comments, so I'm just curious if we can source a Canadian option, or if they make them. And if not, of course we have to do what we have to do.
So we'll do staff and then Councilor Corbin.
Yeah, if I could just add to, so when we purchased the fire truck, which is not the same as a garbage truck, but we're talking a big unit that has to be specialized basically, and you can't just go on the lot and buy one.
Right.
Half of it was built in the States, and then it was transported up to Canada for the rest of the stuff to be done. So I'm not sure about a garbage truck, what kind of situation. Mike may have some more information about that than I do, and maybe we could see if we could source something from Europe, possibly, but we don't know what kind of costs that might be.
Totally,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Okay, Councilor Corbin?
I'm just looking at this whole thing and like to do an interim thing for 4 years and we find out, like, the costs are gonna be, we know what the costs are gonna be. Cost of the truck, the cost of the person operating the cost, and they're gonna factor repairs and stuff to the truck. Plus, more than likely, they're gonna put a 30% profit on there. We know that if we contract it out, it's gonna be way more money. We know that already. Plus now, and if we do a 3 or 4 year trial, then you tack on 2 years if we decide to order a truck, that's gonna set us back 6 years. And to find out that we were wrong, that we made the wrong decision. I think the way it is, we know that contracting it out, there's no doubt about it, it's gonna cost way more money. So why don't we do the proper thing, the responsible thing, is to buy a new truck, replace it. The current truck we had is over 7 years, right? So when you do your costing, like we say we can pay it off in 5 years, but when you do your costing for the village on a new truck, we cost it out over 7 years, right? So we gotta divide the cost of that truck by 7 years and so much per year per truck. for that new truck. So that truck pays for itself in 7 years. If it lasts 10 years, we get a bonus. That 3 years, we get basically for free. And we can't do that with a contract. The contract's gonna go up every year. And we don't know what that increase is gonna be. So, like, doing something like that, we know it's gonna cost us more money, we just don't know how much more, but I can tell you it's gonna be a lot more, because they're not gonna go without a profit. And we're not there to make a profit, but we can put the money that we make extra for that extra 2 or 3 years that it runs, we can set it aside to buy the next new truck. And I think that's the way to go, because the cheaper way, the bottom line for the village is, it's cheaper to buy a new truck.
Okay, Councillor Stevens?
I totally agree. I think the residents are ready to move on from this truck. The only question I have is so it said about 2 years to get a new one. Is this truck gonna last 2 years? And if it doesn't, like, what does that look like for our residents? Does that look like I guess that would probably mean we would contract. And then, like, we did have a lot of breakdowns in the last few months. We haven't had too many recently, but you know, community members were pretty fed up there. Sorry, we're gonna have one now. So sorry. But I just wonder if like not on this motion or anything, but if it's worth starting to look at like an emergency policy where it's implemented immediately, the truck breaks down, we bring in bins, whatever that looks like, I'm not too sure, but.
Or rent.
Yeah, or rent. Yeah, totally.
But I actually talked to people today and they're going like, well, if you had the truck that long, why didn't you buy a new one? Like, they're going, if you need a new truck, buy a new truck. That's all they said.
Right.
So, you know, it's not rocket science. I mean, we need a new truck, buy a damn new truck. We're gonna need it.
Okay, so we have a motion to,
Purchase a new garbage truck.
is that the motion?
Yeah, that's the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Khanna?
Is it the same size of truck that you're thinking about getting? Did they even make that size? I'm talking about, what I'm thinking about is that shop, like you said, was built for that truck. There isn't that much room in it, so if you got something bigger, you're not gonna shut the door. Not that it really matters, I mean, it's a truck, it's not gonna rot. So you're probably, if you had to build another basin for it, what are you looking at, another $300,000 for a new roof over it?
Yeah, but my truck's parked outside. It's not rotting away.
Well,
It's not gonna rot. for 10
village
years.
stuff, they even take the backhoe and put it right on top of the salt pile down there, eh?
Yeah.
It's rusting away, I mean, you can argue with them all day and that they won't listen, because you might get some snow on it, shit like that. The loader sat outside and it was alright, but, yeah, that's what and I think most of that was made in Quebec, that truck.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, we'll put it to the vote, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried.
Right on.
There you go.
Genuine garbage truck.
Yes. And in the meantime, we'll move.
We'll figure it out.
See, we have notices of motion, I didn't know we had them on special agendas, but is that a misprint? Or do we have them on special agendas?
I think we don't exclude them, do we?
No, it's just the same agenda.
Okay, so we go to 11 in camera. I need a motion, Councillor Herman.
I move that council recess to an in-camera meeting pursuant to section 91 of the community charter, paragraph C, labor relations or other employees' relations.
Seconded, Councillor Stevens. Okay, all in favor? It's carried. We'll take a 5-minute recess and come back in camera.